We are back, and we're going to recap some of the developments of the day in case you haven't heard them. But before we do that, here are some of the latest developments, starting with, I guess, a look at the number of the total of people who have been killed in this tragedy at this elementary school, Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, about 83 miles west of San Antonio. 19 children and 2 teachers have been killed. We know the gunman is also accused of killing, or rather shooting, his grandmother previously, but she is still in the hospital. This was an 18-year-old gunman. Just before the shooting, and this is something that CNN has actually reported, they reported that this gunman allegedly texted a teenage girl about his intentions to not only attack and kill, or rather shoot his grandmother, but also to attack an elementary school, and some other things were posted, I believe, on Facebook and social media prior to everything that happened. President Biden plans to travel to Texas to visit victims' families in the coming days. Right now, let's take a look at where things stand with regard to the investigation. This is Mike Valerio reporting from the scene. Just a moment here, we'll pull it up and get the latest from him.
And we're learning new details about the gunman. Law enforcement officials saying he was a high school dropout who lived with his grandmother. This afternoon, the governor of Texas placing the blame for the shooting solely on mental health. What should have been a joyous day just before summer break turned into a nightmare when 19 children and 2 teachers were shot and killed at Robb Elementary on Tuesday. Families, instead of planning vacations, are now planning funerals.
Evil swept across Uvalde yesterday.
These are the faces of just some of the victims. 4th grade teacher Eva Mireles, 10-year-old Amary Jo Garza, 10-year-old Jose Flores, and Javier Lopez smiling here after making honor roll that morning. The suspected gunman is an 18-year-old who police say shot his grandmother before going to the school and opening fire on a 4th grade class.
He was dropped out of school. He had no criminal history that we've been able to find.
As the community grapples with this horrific tragedy, the conversation in Washington turns to curbing gun violence.
Our country is sickened and outraged by the senseless evil that struck Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas.
One nation under guns. It doesn't have to be that way. Our parents don't need to drop their kids off at school and wonder if their kid will be next.
Many now wondering whether these words from politicians will be turned into action. This community trying to make sense of the tragedy. A memorial fund has been set up to help support the victims' families at the First State Bank of Uvalde. In Texas, I'm Chris Wynn. Back to you.
Now let's talk about the thing that everybody has to deal with right now, which is how to talk to children about all of this. Even if they weren't physically there, they saw what happened on the news probably, or maybe heard through friends, and maybe there are rumors circulating. It's important to know how to talk to children when it comes to things like this. Every parent asks themselves this question when some tragedy like this happens. Well, we've got some expert advice. We're going to hear from an expert from Central Texas originally, who you may remember, Delisa Russell, here in a few moments. But first, a report about basically some of the good tactics to use. This is Jen Sullivan, followed by an interview we did earlier today with Delisa Russell.
The images are difficult for anyone, but the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas may cause fear and worry in small children who see or hear about it. When talking to them, make them feel safe. Licensed clinical psychologist Marisa Azarat says parents should first assess their own feelings.
Is it anger? Is it despair? Is it a serious anxiety, a severe anxiety? Once you do that, try to find some balance and then address your child.
Azarat says kids of any age can be bothered by what they're seeing. The images can show up in nightmares and night terrors. She recommends monitoring what children see. If they're too young, turn off the TV to guard against those disturbing images. Experts say when they see the same story, they may think the disaster is happening again and again.
You might see regression. Children that were already toilet trained, for example, they are regressing. Children that were sleeping alone in their bedroom, they might regress and not being able to do so. So we need to be patient.
If they're older, you may want to limit their time watching the news or on the internet. Azarat says asking questions and talking to children about their worries and concerns can help them get back on track emotionally.
Talking to them at their level in a concrete way, reassuring them, telling them that mom is here, that dad is here.
Reassure children that adults in schools work hard to keep them safe. She says all children need extra support and love right now. For Health Minute, I'm Jen Sullivan.
Well, we are joined by Delisa Russell, who you might remember from Central Texas as the director of the Veterans One Stop. Now she is the group CEO of Promises Behavioral Health, overseeing 2 facilities. Delisa, thanks so much for taking time to be with us today. We were talking about, obviously, the tragedy of Uvalde. We talked about it all day, the past 2 days. What are your initial thoughts on this and why these kinds of things happen? What should be done to prevent this kind of thing in the future?
You know, Justin, I can only imagine what the families and the community are feeling there in Uvalde, because I didn't know the children. I'm not a part of the community, and I know how just the news has impacted me. And, you know, all of a sudden this became a very political thing where we're starting to talk about gun reform and all that. I'm not here to talk about that, but I want to talk about how I think the lack of social connectedness may be impacting events like this. You know, the last 3 years we've been locked down, and the outlets that we've had to address mental health, it's not lost on me that this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so just really looking at the lack of social connectedness and the impact that may have on this particular event.
What is I know it's hard to define any particular solution, not knowing the full scope of what happened, but, you know, when someone does feel removed and isolated like that, you know, how do you address that? How do you help people deal with that sort of feeling so that it doesn't, you know, kind of fester and become some out of control, difficult thing that leads to horrible things like this?
You know, Justin, whether we're 18 or we're 80, we need a reason, right? People are looking for reasons and goals to exist. And unfortunately, if life or you don't have a reason to reach up, unfortunately, oftentimes people reach down. And I think that may be what you're seeing with this young man. We're not going to come up with a magic solution today. We're not going to come up with a magical solution this week, but we do need something that's going to help what we're all feeling. And, you know, as I was talking to my staff here, as I was talking to friends, because I've had so many reach out, you know, I remind them, I need you to check in with yourself. I need you to check in with your family. I need you to check in with your friends, with your neighbors. And we need to get back to some basics of saying, how are you? Are you okay? And listening and talking and just taking a moment for that.
And maybe that would be the same advice to parents with their kids. I mean, like you said, it's been 3 very unusual years where they haven't had a lot of social interaction. So maybe that's the parent's responsibility to really, you know, dig in there and see what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, people don't know, do I send my kids to school? Do I not send my kids to school? School is supposed to be a safe haven, and now kids are afraid to go to school. And this is something they've been missing out all during COVID, you know, in their education. I think it's very important. How many of us that have children have gone to an awards ceremony, and that the importance of those last couple of days? I think we just, again, we don't know what is right. But what I can say is, no matter what, checking in with yourself, checking in with your family, checking in with your neighbors and your community, making sure everybody's okay. And you know, I'm never going to tell a news station reporter that people need to turn off the news, but I do say that we have to be able to limit our exposure to our kids. After 9/11, we talked about the impact that watching the Twin Towers fall over and over might have. I think that parents need to take the time to talk to their children about this, because they're going to know that it's going on. And you have to look at the age of the child and what's appropriate, and processing some of those feelings. And and processing, that they're safe. At the end of the day, so many mental health issues roll down to, do we feel safe?
And we're talking about a couple different things here. Maybe the root of it is similar, but I mean, the mental health of this individual who did this horrible thing, and then, of course, the mental health of the people who are impacted by it, and not even directly, but just seeing it. For the kids at this school, for the kids that are perceiving this here in Central Texas, I mean, I know that we ask this question frequently, way too frequently, but what does a parent do to help them cope with it? I mean, I feel like we've asked that 1,000 times, and it's so sad we've had to, but to remind people, what can a parent do when kids are exposed to this kind of horrible tragedy?
Again, I guess it really depends on the age of the child. In Central Texas, we have resources from our local mental health authority, Clara Center, Region 12, NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. The great thing about the internet, there are many ways that people can access experts that are much more in tune to kids than even I am. But I do think that talking, listening, praying, giving them a hug, saying it's going to be okay. I think the most discouraging thing for me today, I have really not watched all the details, but what I was hearing is people were saying there's nothing we can do. And there's a lot that we can do. And it starts with sitting down with the people that you love, talking, processing, listening.
Just a couple things. I mean, if someone is dealing with isolation, or maybe they're having some other mental health challenge, and maybe I'm a parent, or maybe I'm a friend, what sorts of signs do I need to look for that they maybe need help but they're not reaching out for it?
That's a very interesting question that we've been talking about too, and COVID has changed so much. I know people are tired of talking about COVID, but let's just talk about the impact that it's had. I grew up in a one red light town, Justin. I went to the First Baptist Church. We went out and we played volleyball. We went in and talked to our youth pastor. Waco in Central Texas is still small enough that you have wonderful outlets for the kids. You have school counselors that I am certain are rallying around on how to deal with this, even though we're at the end of the year. I can guarantee you that Allison Smith over at Midway High School already has a team of people that people can reach out to. It comes down to communicating, asking the questions, checking in on people, getting connected with your community and the people around you.
And I know that we've talked a lot about what we can do to help other people, but as individuals, we can help ourselves too. So as part of Mental Health Awareness Month, as we near the end of the month, what message do you have for folks as far as helping themselves, if maybe recognizing signs that something's not quite the way they'd like it to be, or taking that first step to get a little help sorting through something? What advice do you have for people that may be struggling or kind of nearing the point that they would begin struggling to get some help and deal with it?
One of the main reasons that we have Mental Health Awareness Month, which is always recognized in the month of May, is taking the stigma away from people that suffer from behavioral health. I think it's not what we thought of even several years ago whenever you're looking at a diagnosed mental health issue. I think that many of us are going through more anxiety. We're worrying about financial things. We're worrying about health reasons. We're worrying about job reasons. If you are employed, most of your employers have EAP programs that you can reach out to your human resources. I know I work for an amazing organization, Promises Behavioral Health. We have EAP. Of course, I have wonderful counselors right down the hall, like Dana Lafayette, who is people in Central Texas know Dana. But it starts with some conversation. If you're not comfortable talking to your family, if you're not comfortable talking to your church, is again looking at perhaps an EAP through your HR, your local mental health authority, in one of those areas.
What does EAP stand for? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that term.
Employee Assistance Program.
Employee Assistance Program. Okay, and yeah, I do see more.
So if
businesses
someone is employed and they may be having a lot of depression, anxiety, or issues, almost every employer, I bet you even your news station has one, that if you are going through something, that you talk to human resources and you would be able to go to an outside entity to talk about things confidentially and get help, and that your employer gives you a certain amount of time off of work to be able to deal with those, whether it's just a counseling session once a week or going into inpatient treatment.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to share? I appreciate you taking time to talk to us about this today, but anything else you want to make sure we get out there?
Again, I would just say getting back to the basics, getting back to social connectedness. You know, that is systemically what I think is really going on in our community, whether you're talking about shootings, behavioral health crises, addiction, overdose, suicide, giving and having a reason to reach up and not down.
Delisa Russell, we appreciate your time today. Again, the director now of Promises Behavioral Health in, it's, I believe, Spring, and then also in College Station, right?
Yes, we're in College Station and Houston.
Not too far from Central Texas. We appreciate you. Thanks again, Delisa. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hearing there from Delisa Russell, the county